I am one of the biggest Mission Impossible fans on the planet. I have watched the Mission Impossible movies on release at movie theaters since I was a kid, and I own all the movies on Blu-ray. These are all fantastic movies, but I wanted to make my own tier list ranking. So here it is.
Kittredge, you've never seen me very upset.
The first Mission Impossible is honestly a masterpiece. It sets up the groundwork for the rest of the franchise so well, and it's still being referenced in the 8th movie 28 years later. The iconic intro, the Langley sequence, the mind games between Phelps and Hunt, and I just love how it's one man against the entire world trying to prove his innocence. You really have to sit down and pay attention in this movie. It's not a popcorn flick. This is a classic film, and it sits nicely on the S tier.
This is not mission difficult, Mr. Hunt. It's mission impossible.
Alright, let's address the elephant in the room. This movie isn't the strongest in the franchise, we all know it, but it's also not as bad as you remember. It is peak 2000s cheese with John Woo flair, the plot is decent, and the knife stunt is insane, but the downfalls are very apparent with the villain and love interest that never get mentioned again. We're going to be giving this a C tier.
Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall.
This movie is rock solid. Ethan Hunt retires and is shown to be mentoring a new IMF agent. He also has a romantic interest with Julia, but obviously it's not all sunshine and rainbows, and the movie goes haywire quick. The villain Owen Davian is played by Philip Seymour Hoffman and is arguably one of the best villains in the franchise. The intro, the rescue, the Vatican heist, the skyscraper jump, and the bridge scene makes this such an action-packed installment that it gets an A tier.
Your line's not long enough! No shit!
This movie redefines and sets a new standard for the Mission Impossible franchise. The plot for this is amazing, but it's also helmed by one of the most forgettable villains in the franchise. The new addition is Jeremy Renner's Brandt, and I love how his character has a secret that alludes to why Ethan ended up in prison and why Julia isn't around. That was a great subplot. But obviously, the highlight of this movie comes down to the Dubai scenes, specifically the Burj Khalifa scene. I still can't believe Tom did that for real. It's truly insane stuff. This movie has great action, a great team, intense Kremlin sequences, and the masterpiece of the Dubai scenes makes this an S tier for me. This installment starts the Christopher McQuarrie era for the franchise. This was a lot more espionage, and it had a very memorable villain with Solomon Lane. It also introduced the fan-favorite character Ilsa, who is the highlight of this movie. Her character is caught between British intelligence, Solomon Lane, and the IMF, and it's very interesting to see how she navigates all three parties. I love the healthy blend of espionage and action in this movie. From the plane stunt, the opera assassination, the underwater sequence, which then immediately transitions into the car chase, which then goes into the motorcycle chase. It was all fantastic. And I love the finale, which forces Ethan to think outside of the box and psychologically trick Solomon into capturing him. This movie goes on the A tier.
What's done is done when we say it's done.
Mission Impossible Fallout. This movie really respects the lore of the entire franchise and builds off of a great foundation that was laid by Rogue Nation. This has the strongest cold open in the franchise, it has fantastic villains, and it has a very well-paced plot. The action sequences in this movie are legendary. It literally has everything. Intense car chases, motorcycle chases, the halo jump, the foot chases, and the helicopter chase. It really fires on all cylinders. I also love how it delves into Ethan's way of operating and how it shows the glaring flaws and how massive the consequences are. Not only do I think this is the best Mission Impossible movie and gets the easiest S tier of all time, I believe that this is actually the greatest action movie of all time. It's very tough to beat when you realize Tom Cruise did all the stunts in this film.
I understand. You're upset. I'm not upset.
MI7. This was a very interesting installment because it was a part 1 of 2, which has since been retconned. This movie went through a lot of issues with COVID lockdowns and even the Hollywood strikes. But nonetheless, this movie powers through and gives us fantastic sequences and expands the lore of the franchise almost in a prequel kind of way. Kittredge is back and that was super cool to see. But I was very interested in Briggs and Degas on how they fit into the larger narrative. The villain in this movie is from Ethan's past and uses the very relevant tool of artificial intelligence and uses that in every step of his plan. The action sequences in this movie were very good. I love the airport scene, the car chases were solid, and obviously the tentpole stunt in this movie was a motorcycle cliff jump going right into the train sequence. A lot of people's biggest crutch in this movie is the death of Ilsa. I don't know if I'm delusional, but I just don't buy it. Although I do think that this movie suffers from having an incomplete story and a lot of unanswered questions and a 2-year wait, I will be putting this at the bottom of A tier for now. This all really depends on the release of Final Reckoning, which can either boost it or bring it down, because this is a two-parter at heart. This is my final tier list for the franchise so far. This is just my opinion, so I'm really interested to see if you guys agree or disagree with me in the comments. And feel free to drop your own ranking down below, because in all honesty, these rankings have switched around for me as time went on, and who knows, maybe a decade down the road, it could be completely different. Time will tell. I do feel like Fallout spoiled us because it's a very tough one to beat, and I believe it's the franchise's magnum opus. I am very excited to go see Final Reckoning in theaters because it could potentially be the last movie in the franchise, and it looks like it will be calling back to the entire lore. But I believe that Tom Cruise can bring this home and bring a solid conclusion to one of the greatest franchises ever. Anyways, this kind of video was super new to me. I always see people doing tier lists on YouTube, and I always wanted to do it. If you guys are new, subscribe and drop your Mission Impossible thoughts down below.